Every energy provider in our viewing area, they were all told, cut down on the amount of power that they were using.
Imagine a president deliberately colluding with the United Nations and foreign corporations to shut off the power supply of the United States for their gain.
So if somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted.
If you lost power yesterday morning as part of the rolling blackouts, chances are you probably will lose power again.
If that is not treason, what is?
A cap and trade system in place that is as aggressive, if not more aggressive, than anybody else's out there.
No coal plants here in America. Build them if they're going to build them over there.
Which means that every unit of carbon or greenhouse gases would be charged to the polluter.
I want to talk to you about treason, and I don't use that word lightly. The story I'm about to tell you is well documented and is hiding in plain view. The facts are all there for the world to see. They are incontrovertible. But it's more than treason. It is premeditated economic warfare, economic siege against not just the United States, but the entire Western world. And below this video, I'll post links to all of the articles that I'm about to source here in front of you. The Kyoto Protocol to put giant taxes on all industrial and human activity has been openly designed to create a form of neo-feudalistic serfdom where the individual is bound by red tape and can never develop a successful business or organization unless they're globalist insiders. Now, you've seen President Obama in the last 2 years issue hundreds of waivers to McDonald's and others with their millions of employees saying they don't have to get insurance for their employees, but all of their competition does. That's an unfair trade advantage. That's economic discrimination, economic warfare. And the information I'm about to cover now is exactly what we're dealing with the greenhouse gas taxes, but on a larger scale. It gives government, it's self-controlled by the Fortune 100 corporations, the power to shut down all of their competition. Now, under the Kyoto Protocol, China, India, Mexico, and 160 plus other third world countries have to make zero carbon cuts. They have to pay no taxes, but the West does. Where's industry going to go if they implement this? To the third world countries. And that's where the big mega banks, the JP Morgans, the Goldman Sachs, all of these predatory robber barons have been investing our taxpayer money they get through bailouts. So this is basically about them shutting down their competition. Now, in the last week, we've seen blackouts coast to coast. Here where I live in Austin, Texas, we have had the traffic lights not working in the last 2 days. Power has been off to many of the homes and businesses, including hospitals. My dad's dental office hasn't had power much of the time. In Dallas, police departments, major hospitals have had no power. But don't worry, the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, paid for by taxpayers, it's had plenty of power because the big diversion for the public from what's happening, it's got to stay in place. But here's the treason. And this is what's important to understand. Regardless of what you think about man-made global warming, and if you think you can pay some carbon indulgence to the equivalent of the modern, green Vatican to get you and your family out of purgatory, that's your business. But understand that America is being deindustrialized, that we are losing our sovereignty right now, and that mega corporations like General Electric and others have come in and lobbied openly to have these carbon taxes put in place. They've supported it because they are given waivers from it, but all of their competitors aren't. Right here in Austin, Texas, a power plant owned and run for more than 50 years by the city was bought out through federal funds and shut down. They've built a $3 billion plus power plant in Corpus Christi. The feds are preparing to shut it down. They've shut plants down in Georgia, in Kansas, in South Dakota, in California. They're not allowing them to be built anywhere. China builds between 3 and 5 new coal-powered plants every single week. The United States allows less than 3 to be opened every single year. Allow me to quantify what it means for the United States and the rest of Western Europe and Canada, the other Western nations, the wealthy nations like Australia and New Zealand, to not be able to have new coal power plants. 50+% of the power in the United States is generated by coal-fired plants. It's close to that in other nations as well, who are seeing massive restrictions on not just new plants being built, but old plants being shut down, and plants that are currently operating being told they have to restrict how much power they can put out. We've now seen the consequences of the forced deindustrialization of our country. We're seeing a nation that can't even supply power to its population. We're seeing massive increases in the cost of the power we have. And that's exactly what the system wants. Now, let me go over what's really happening here. This has nothing to do with saving the earth from horrible carbon dioxide that plants breathe. Here is the Washington Examiner reporting. Obama issues global warming rules in January, gives General Electric an exemption in February. General Electric, the new head of his economic board, is the former head of General Electric. General Electric's one of the biggest builders of coal-powered plants and operators of plants. They've supported the new carbon taxes. Of course they do. They're exempt. Their competition isn't. They've also built plants in Mexico that aren't under the same restrictions of the U.S. And now because Texas can't supply its power, and the 5 surrounding states that Texas supplies can't supply their power, we're now having to buy it at premium prices from Mexico. And guess who's making most of that money? General Electric. Can't you see the evil genius of this? A few insiders put Obama in office. They ram through the carbon taxes, and then they get exemptions, but all of their competition doesn't. That's the treason. Obama, and the Republicans for that matter, to a great extent, are bought and paid for by offshore banks. These offshore banks have set up China as the model for the 21st century because they're authoritarian. China owns the majority of our debt. Next is the private Federal Reserve. And who finances all of this? The private central banks. So they're able to go in and shut down their competition. And as a response, we don't have the cheap power for our factories and can't be competitive. We have higher utility bills. If that isn't treason, I don't know what is. Shutting off a nation's power supply, seizing a nation's power supply, and only allowing globalist insiders to operate. And because of the artificial scarcity, because there's less power than before, they don't just knock out their competition, they make record profits. This is illegal. This is racketeering. This is economic warfare against our country. Now, at the globalist level, it's a profit-making scheme to consolidate power and vertically integrate the economy. But at the low level, you've got all these human-hating environmentalists running around praising the shutdown of power plants. Congress has said no to the Kyoto Protocol. And so our supposed president is selling us out to the United Nations and to a treaty we haven't even adopted, and he is violating the Congress of the United States' will when the Congress is the elected representatives of this country. Again, treason, economic warfare, jacking up our power prices, going in like the mafia and shutting down coal-powered plant companies that aren't part of the inside system. There needs to be congressional investigations. This is economic espionage against our nation, and the globalists are just getting started. Look at who funds carbon taxes. Dutch Roll Shell, BP, General Electric, because they're the big mega corporations whose GDP is bigger than most countries' gross domestic product. They stand to gain by controlling economies and forcing people to buy key energy systems from them. This is exactly what we've seen in Latin America, what we've seen in Africa and Asia and the Middle East, where the globalists come in, give loans to the countries of Western taxpayer money through the IMF and World Bank, and then tell them, but you've got to only give this company a contract for your hydroelectric dam or your coal-powered dam or for your nuclear power plant. And then they control the infrastructure and the architecture of their power system, and that makes them dependent on it. There's a reason third world countries have power outages. There's a reason people make fun of them. It's because the globalists are in control of them and want a post-industrial world. They're threatened by free market. They're threatened by people getting plenty of energy. They want to artificially control it and shut it down so you don't have access. I know I'm angry, but shouldn't you be angry as well? If the globalists are able to only allow their friends to operate power plants and charge us more money for energy, if they're able to shut down people that aren't insiders, if they're able to put 20% carbon taxes on California, if they're able to get the city of Austin to pass a $3.6 billion increase in power prices in the next 3 years as part of carbon taxes, what's coming next? This modern feudalism is all about government being able to decide whether you can have space heaters outside that Europe is moving to ban, or even have a fireplace. They're saying all human activity is illegal unless you pay them a tax to be able to engage in it. Then they give their friends, their insiders, waivers. Texas has had power outages in the last 2 days. I can hardly get to work because the traffic lights aren't even working, and the police aren't out there directing traffic. They're out there with radar guns in the middle of the traffic, writing people tickets. It's crazy. This is feudalism. We're being completely and totally looted because our nation has been taken over. We've seen the head of the Goddard Space Center at NASA say that he wants a post-industrial U.S. We've seen the calls for carbon taxes on the third world that conservatively will kill 1 billion people in the next decade. We see food prices exploding worldwide, and much of it is because of what's happening with the implementation of carbon taxes. This puppet, this corporate minion, President Obama, is not shutting down our infrastructure and our power because he wants to save the earth. He's doing it because General Electric is basically running his White House and stands to make hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars out of shutting down their competition. And the worst part is Obama doesn't even have a law. Congress wouldn't sign on to Kyoto. He's implementing it through the EPA. Then they go on and lie and say that carbon dioxide is a toxic gas, or that coal power plants are dangerous and putting out pollutants. They're not. The United States has the cleanest coal plants in the world. They run what's left of the coal through systems that bathe the smoke in water and remove all of the toxic elements, but they play on the public's ignorance. They point cameras at coal-powered plants in cold weather and show what looks like smoke coming out of their towers, when really all it is hot air coming out into the cold, just like when you breathe on a December morning and you see the condensation. That's not smoke. That's water vapor and carbon dioxide. That's the same thing coming out of these coal-powered plants. We hear all this talk about not being energy dependent on foreign nations. We have enough coal to run this country for 1,000+ years, it's been estimated. We have more oil than Saudi Arabia and Alaska, but we're not allowed to extract it. And most of the power sources, the oil, the natural gas, has to actually be imported into places like Alaska. We don't have to be feudal serfs and slaves. This is brazen criminality that's taking place. We've got to educate our fellow Americans and others around the world who are having our energy infrastructure hijacked. If this isn't treason, if this isn't economic warfare against our country, I don't know what is. How can we compete against China when they have no environmental standards, no carbon taxes, when they have sweetheart deals with globalist corporations? We can't. Americans are smart, are intelligent, are hardworking, but we deserve a level playing field. And the globalists are trying to set up a system to create artificial scarcity, to restrict the amount of power we can get to make giant profits. In closing, back in 2005, Raw Story, the Associated Press, PrisonPlanet.com, all reported on documents that the AP sued and got from the big oil companies, who are also allied with the globalists. And the oil companies in the mid-1990s talked about buying up the independent refineries and using government regulations that they basically wrote to shut down those refineries so that the glut of oil coming into the United States and that we have available domestically couldn't be refined even if we have it. Why'd they do that? Well, if there's too much oil, they create a situation where it's artificially scarce. It's like De Beers and diamonds. Diamonds are barely even semi-precious, but people will mortgage their future just to buy their wife a 5-carat diamond ring. But the system artificially makes them scarce by restricting the countries that have diamonds from being able to ship them to the world, and they're only allowed to sell them to the cartel of the Oppenheimers known as De Beers. You've been given the facts. Will America let the globalists shut off our power system? Will we allow them to put us under economic siege and warfare? Or will we wake up to the facts and say no to their global warming fraud and remove the New World Order system that is attempting to destroy our country's sovereignty and its capacity to operate through its energy system. This attack on our energy system is treason, and those responsible need to be held accountable. To learn more about this and other vital topics, visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.